we've got a special guest.
On Flan Emily Jade with Chriso, you may know our next guest from one of the following: LA Confidential, E Street, Red Planet, A Country Practice, The Ring 2, Heartbreak High, Land of the Dead, Sweat, Home and Away, The Devil Wears Prada, The Guardian, Marching Call, The Mentalist. I need to take a breath. It's Simon Baker!
Did you like that?
Simon
Wow,
Baker,
that was
good morning.
You guys do a lot of homework.
Yeah, that's that
we
guy
have
there.
to.
That's
That
Maddie.
guy.
That's Maddie right there in the corner.
He's
he does
filming
all that.
you.
Yeah, we have to do homework. Welcome to the studio. Welcome
Yes.
back to the Gold Coast, man.
It's nice to be here. You know, I used to live on the Gold Coast.
Did you?
Yeah, for a minute in the sort of, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s.
Whereabouts, mate? What suburb?
I actually lived with a group of guys in a fibro shack on Garfield Terrace on the beachside, just down from a building that was called the Nautilus.
Oh, yeah.
And it was probably the last house along that strip. We lived in there for about a year, and then they
Knocked it
were
down.
evicted and knocked it down. They built something, but it was pretty great. I worked at the Hyatt Regency at Sanctuary Cove.
Oh, nice.
I sold timeshare
Oh,
in Mermaid Beach.
Is that right?
Well, you were a pool cleaner.
Well,
Or
I had to
you
do a
worked
bit
on
of
the
pool
pool.
cleaning.
Yeah.
I prefer to sort of refer to myself as a pool boy.
Pool specialist.
Can I hire you? Are you still available for that? I've got a pool.
His rate card's significantly different from then.
That's a lot more.
Significantly different.
Pay rates
So what,
gone
about a
up
year,
little.
was it?
That I lived on the Goldie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was maybe a year and a half.
Well, actually, can we
Yeah,
play
yeah.
you something? Because we know that you grew up in Ballina.
Mm-hmm.
Because a girl this morning has rung, because we've been talking about you coming in all morning. We're so excited. It's the first time I've looked nice in about 7 months. And
I don't believe that.
and she
That wasn't true.
she went to school with you. So have a listen. Her name is Sonia, and she wanted to tell us a few things about you.
Yeah, she said she went to school with you.
I did. I went to Ballina High School, and we used to call him Smiley. But I was going to say, you should say to him, does he remember getting in trouble all the time, getting kicked out of classes, and we used to have to stay in the hallway until we were allowed back in. We used to talk all the time and get into so much trouble. So,
I love it. And was he as hot then as he is now?
oh my God, Can we just take a moment? We always thought this guy's going to go somewhere or do something. But he was always so like friendly, but he was always like the class fool. Like he'd prank you or pull your shoelace undone or something like that. He was always the guy that did that.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
my wife is hoping for more than shoelaces, let me tell
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that true?
Is that true?
No, none of it's true. I've never heard of her. Where is Ballina? Yeah, it might be. I did used to get kicked out of some classes. History. My history teacher didn't like me much.
Regrets that now, probably.
Can you remember your teacher's name?
His name was Mr. Smith.
Well, look, let's talk about your new movie, which is called Breath. We loved it. It was beautiful. Made me want to take up surfing. And I find this extraordinary about it. The young actors are the one, like you were good, that's good, but the young actors were amazing. So when I found out they were surfers that you taught to act, I was blown away.
Well, I didn't completely teach them to act. They both have kind of a very unique and charismatic energy, and they worked really well together. But yeah, they hadn't acted before, so it really lends a lot to the authenticity, and the authenticity of it is what was, for me, was one of the most key factors.
Well, mate, every surfing movie I've ever seen in the past, they arrive at the beach, they look at the water, they go, wow, it looks great, let's go in, and then they cut back to the ocean and it looks completely different, and it's a different day. They filmed it a different time, there's more wind, it just looks different. Didn't see that once in your beautiful movie, mate. It struck me as, some of the surfing scenes in this, those are massive waves. And those kids can really surf, but they can also really, really act. So how did this start for you? How did you decide to direct a movie like this?
Well, like yourself, I grew up in the water, and I always went to see narrative surf films. Like Big Wednesday was kind of the ultimate film that you watched again and again and again, but it didn't represent our culture.
Not at all.
It was Californian. It was more. Big Wednesday was really about the Vietnam War, and a good narrative film isn't about the surfing. The surfing is really the canvas for it in a way, and helps define that culture. of friendship and the relationships around that. But I was always looking for authenticity in it because it never clicked emotion. It never felt right when you watch those films. It always felt separate. And I thought, well, it's a challenge, but why not have a crack at trying to make the first one that feels real? And because I do know the water, and I think having worked in the industry for long enough, I felt like I could maybe put the elements together and govern it in a right way so it never goes off track.
Yeah, it's a story. It's a dead set story.
And it stays there.
It's not a surfing movie. It's a story, and there's unbelievable surfing in it. I found it extraordinary, and I was transfixed. And obviously, it's my era totally. Everything in that picture is all the things on the wall, or the bedspreads, or the beds, even the surfboards. Everything is straight out of my life.
The bike's got me.
Yeah, the bike.
bikes,
Right,
I
that was
remember
exactly
having
my
one, yeah.
bike. That dragster was exactly the bike I tried to put under one arm and rise to the beach. It doesn't work. If it's windy, you're in huge trouble.
Yeah.
Did you notice the Speedo? Looney had a Speedo on his.
Yeah,
I
on his
didn't see
bike,
the
yeah, yeah.
Speedo. No.
There were no Spooky Dokies though.
No, true. And no big orange flag.
They
But-
came in a bit late. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
you also had to have a bit of money to get the extras, the
Yeah,
Spooky
yeah.
Dokies.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the-
I love the girl on the back of the ute with no bra, with the no bra on.
You noticed that?
Well,
Interesting.
that was my mum. Like that's how she wandered around in the 70s. You
Still
know?
does.
Like,
It still does. It's really embarrassing.
Go,
now
go.
that you've directed something and it's spectacular, what are you going to do? Are you going to act? Are you going to direct? I mean, please tell me you're going to be in films because I need to see it.
Well, I've got to, part of making this movie was, and a part of the pressure of making this movie was because I was representing people like yourself, because I knew with that book, with Tim's book, that it hit home for a lot of people, and so there's a great responsibility in that. And this is the last part of the process of the journey of what that film is for me, is to go around and deliver it, and give it to the audience. So I've got a couple of weeks of this.
Yep.
And then I'm going to have a little bit of a break, and I'll just see what comes.
Well, mate, it held my interest from the first moment to the very last, and maybe Margaret Pomerantz would never rate a film like this, but it's the first film in 5 years
She
for
did,
me.
actually.
Oh,
What
no.
did she?
What I'm
Put it
about
on
to say is she wouldn't rate it in the same way I will,
Yeah.
because it's the first film in 5 years that I didn't have to nip out and have a wee during, and I just couldn't move. I couldn't go and miss a second of this. For you, now that it's all done, how do you feel?
Oh, it's kind of surreal in a sense. It's still Rick and I, who's the water cinematographer, who did an incredible job, and we're kind of soulmates working on this film in a lot of ways. We did a panel last night for the Gold Coast Film Festival, and at the end of the panel, he looked at me last night and he goes, "I still can't believe you pulled it off." And I said, "Neither can I." So there still is this sort of sense, even when I see this film screened and the opening credits come up and it just starts, I still go, I can't believe that we actually pulled it off and did it.
And having great success with it as well at the film festivals. They're all really liking it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's not something I
careful
can.
about, yeah.
Well, no, it's nice. It's lovely to get complimented on your work, but it's not something that I can control. I could control whether or not, to a degree, whether or not the film worked out, and I got a lot of help from a lot of fantastic, talented people, and Mother Nature really swung in our favour
With the waves.
with everything.
Oh, the waves are incredible.
Filmmaking in general, you're at its mercy, but when you do get in the water, you're at its mercy times 1,000.
What do you think of reading a book first and then watching a movie, or watching a movie first and then reading the book? Because I hadn't read the book. I didn't know about it. So for me, it was, I now have got to go read the book, but I enjoyed it. But often I read the book and then see the film and go, oh, I should have just stayed with the book.
I have a great respect for books as a form of art.
Yeah, as a book. Yeah,
As a book, and I have a great respect for cinema and films as a separate form of art. And you can make a film of a book, but it's not going to be the film of the book. The film should live on its own as its own piece of work. So, yeah, the book inspired me to make the film. My interpretation of that book. The next person might have made a different interpretation of that book. It's not a literal translation of the book. You can't do that. They're two different mediums, and I don't ever look at it like that. And a lot of people say, "Oh shit, I want to read the book quickly before I see the film." And I go, "That's okay. The book's there. You can always go back to the book. It's a beautiful book. I encourage you to read it before or after if you want, but they're different things."
So
Yeah,
please
they are
come and
different.
see my film.
What's more interesting to you? Oh, tough question, but making TV as a star or making movies as a director?
Well, I love the scale of cinema
Yep.
and the multi-dimensional aspect of it. Like I'm really into sound design as well as cinematography, and you get to really push and explore those things in the cinema.
In cinema.
In the television, you sort of you sometimes it gets pushed into the sort of talking heads scenario
Okay.
where it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
information, cliffhanger. Information, cliffhanger.
One last question, because I know we're getting the wrap up, but I really just want to talk to you for about 10 hours. How was the cup of tea I made you?
I've been talking too much. I haven't. It's piping hot.
Here we go.
Is it okay? Because she tends to make people tea.
Oh, that's divine.
Victory! 2 from 2, friends. 2 from 2.
Go and see Breath.
Yes. Simon
One of
Baker.
the great Australian movies.
The movie is in cinemas May 3. Go and see it, mate. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you,
this morning.
guys. Cheers.
Flan and Emily Jade with Chriso podcast.
1029 Hot Tomato.